Hey guys, this is our fifth installment in our After Eden series, and we're finally getting to a story that I bet most of you know, which is the story of Noah and the ark. And we're going to spend 2 weeks in the story of Noah and the ark. But before that, we need to remember what's been going on. So last week we saw that God had preserved a line through Adam's son Seth for the promise of the Redeemer of humanity. Remember, God promised Adam and Eve that through them there would be a Savior born who was going to save everyone from the curse of disobedience and brokenness and sin. And through the line of Seth, we see that God is continuing his faithfulness to this line, even if the Savior hasn't shown up yet. At the very end of this line, we see this really righteous guy named Noah. And that's good news, because just as Noah is born, there's an issue going on. We looked at the line of Cain, right, who makes this first city, and this city is full of sin and wickedness and violence and brokenness, and it gets to be so much, and everyone else on the whole earth is so wicked that God is saying he's going to just wipe it all out and start over again. God says, forget about it. You know what? I have no reason to put up with these rebels living in my world. And a matter of fact, they're making everything worse. They're not just keeping it to themselves, they're corrupting the rest of my world. And God says, I'm going to wipe it all out, and I'm going to start over. This is the very last thing that we looked at last week. I'm going to read the last little verse here to remind you. This is what he says. So the Lord said, I will blot out from the earth the human beings I have created, people together with animals and creeping things and the birds of the air, for I'm sorry that I've made them. And you go, whoa! God, what about your promise? God, what about your promise to redeem humankind? What about your promise to save us from sin? God, what about your promise to do all this? God, I don't want you to wipe me out, right? Sometimes I have bad days. And I hope that if I have a bad day, God doesn't look down at me and decide that I need to be wiped out. Well, that's not what's happening here. God's not going back on his promise to save humanity from sin. God looks at this sinful city descended from this murder of his brother, and things have just gotten so nasty that God needs to press the reset button. That these people are not going to be able to be saved. And he says, I need to start over fresh, and I'm just going to wipe everything out. And we say, but God, what about the promise? So what he says next is, but Noah found favor in the sight of the Lord. Today we're going to look at what it is about Noah. What it is about Noah that had him find favor in the sight of the Lord. What is it about Noah that let him be used in God's plan in the bringing of the Savior, who you and I as Christians know to be Jesus, who saved the whole world from sin? What is it that God saw in Noah? That out of this whole world, that he was like, yeah, this guy is the guy that I'm going to choose to be the new father of humanity. Even as Adam was the first father of humanity, there's going to be this guy Noah. I'm going to wipe everyone else out except for him, and we're going to restart with Noah and his family. What is it about him? What is it about him? Well, we're going to read a little today, and we're going to figure it out. Starting in chapter 6, verse 9, or verse 11, I'm sorry. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. We talked about this. And God saw that the earth was corrupt, for every living thing had been corrupted in its way upon the earth. And God said to Noah, I've determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am now going to destroy them along with the earth. Make yourself an ark of cypress wood, and make room in it, and cover it inside and outside with pitch or tar. And this is how you're going to make it. You're going to make it 300 cubits long and 50 cubits wide, and its height's going to be 30 feet. And you're going to make a roof, and you're going to finish it a cubit above. And God keeps on going with all these lists about how this ark needs to be made, and these little detailed things. And Noah's probably got his head spinning. And then God starts in, and he says, for my part, I'm going to bring floodwaters on the earth to destroy everything under the heavens, which has the breath of life. And he keeps on talking about how everything's going to die. And then he starts giving Noah really complex instructions about these animals. He says, and you're going to bring 2 of every kind, and you want to bring these sorts of kinds and these sorts of kinds, and make sure you don't forget about the birds, right? And God says, because I'm going to destroy everything. And he goes through all of these instructions, and he says all this to Noah. And if I was Noah, I'd be sitting there and I'd be like, what? Like, God, can you explain this a little bit to me? God, you want to tell me what's going on? God, you just said you're going to kill everybody on the face of the earth, and I'm a little concerned. If that was me in Noah's position, you better be sure that's what I'd be asking. You better be sure I'd be very confused, that I want some answers, that I want God to explain to me what's going on. But Noah doesn't respond like that. After God gets finished listing all of these things that he expects from Noah and laying out his plan for Noah, I would expect Noah just to be like flabbergasted and like confused and not sure what to do and full of like doubt and questions. And he may have been. I bet Noah felt a lot of those things. But instead of complaining, right, or demanding that God explain everything to him, look what Noah does. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. Right? In this narrative, we hear all these things that God has to say. Okay, this is how you build the ark, and this is how long it needs to be, and this is how tall, right? And these are the sorts of animals, and they are supposed to look like this, and you store them here, and you need to get this sort of food, and you got to make sure all this, and make sure you get all your kids, and round them up, and have them help you. And what does Noah say? He doesn't say anything. He just does what God says, and he gets to work. Now, I want you guys to think about how different this is than Adam and Eve in the garden. Adam and Eve in the garden get one really simple instruction. God says, don't eat the fruit. Don't eat the fruit. From this tree, not any of the fruit, just one from this tree, really easy, don't eat any of it. And Adam and Eve say, I don't know. You know, the serpent whispers in their ear and they say, I don't know. I kind of think maybe it might be a good idea to eat the fruit. It's the one thing that God said not to do, but I think eating the fruit would be a really good idea. I think maybe I know better than God. I think maybe I have a better idea what right and wrong look like. But Noah receives complex instructions that he can't understand, and he doesn't know where it's going, and this message from God that must have left him scared and full of doubt and fear and confusion. But Noah responds with obedience. And because of that, he gets to be part of God's plan. Noah gets to be the second Adam who responds to God with obedience and who's going to preserve all of humanity. Chapter 7 is more of Noah getting ready for this flood. And he goes and he collects all the animals, and a lot of time passes, and Noah gets older, and he's spent time working on this ark, faithfully following God's command, and he's got to start to wonder if it's going to pay off. But God says, finally, in 7 days, Noah, what you've been working on is going to happen. For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground. And Noah did all that the Lord had commanded. So Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came on the earth. And Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives went into the ark, and they got to escape the waters of the flood. And the clean animals and the animals that were not clean, and all the bird and everything that creeps on the ground, 2 of everything were in the ark with Noah. As God had commanded Noah, Noah did it. And after 7 days, the waters of the flood came on the earth, just like God said. It's a good thing that Noah listened. You and I should be glad that Noah was faithful to obey the plan that God had for him. That he wasn't second guessing, always looking for a way to kind of get around God. Not that Noah didn't have doubts. Not that Noah didn't have worries. Not that Noah didn't feel anxiety, didn't always know what to do, didn't always know how to feel, that he didn't have bad days, but in the end, Noah obeyed. And it's a good thing, because the floodwaters coming in Noah's family and all of the animals of the earth. But the earth needs to restart and thrive. What God needs to do to start a new creation is on this ark. And Noah didn't have to be included, right? God could do this on his own. God could restart on his own and make more humans if he needed to, but Noah gets to be included in God's plan because of his faithful obedience. So in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, on the 17th day of the month, on the day that all of the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heaven were opened, and the rain fell on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, on the very same day, Noah with his sons and his wife and their wives entered the ark, and all the animals, and they were saved. Right? So think about it like this. This is how the people writing the Bible thought about the universe. They thought of it like a snow globe. And above the snow globe there's water, and below the snow globe there's water, but inside the snow globe there's air. And what happens is there's holes in the top of the snow globe and holes in the bottom of the snow globe, and the whole snow globe starts to fill up for 40 days and 40 nights, but Noah is safe inside his ark. Finally, we see that the faithfulness of Noah pays off. Everything on dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. God blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, human beings and animals and creeping things and birds of the air. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those that were with him in the ark. And the waters swelled on the earth for 150 days. Noah is on this ark of obedience, built out of trust in God, even through doubt, even in crazy circumstances, even when God asked him to do something that he didn't understand. Noah is saved because of his obedience. For you and me, it's not always easy to follow what God has for us. I know that you guys, as you go through life, as you're in school, as you're around friends, sometimes there's things that you know that God says, that you know from this Bible, that you know from church, that you know from people who teach you, and you say, I don't see how this applies right now. I don't know if I need to be obedient in this circumstance. I don't understand why God has this here. But what you do need to understand is that for us who are obedient to God's plan, we can be used, and we're going to be saved, and we're going to be included in something bigger than ourselves. But if we're like Adam and Eve, and we say, you know what, I don't think God knows what he's talking about. Not that we don't have doubts and hard days and times where we're unsure, and we can have those feelings, and God isn't angry at us for those. But if we are the sort of people who are always trying to get one up on God, who always think we know a little bit better, then there are going to be consequences in our lives. Not because God is angry and vengeful, but because his commands for us are actually the best things for us. Those wicked people that God wiped out in the flood were people who had gone so far astray and who wouldn't listen to him and couldn't be redeemed. So for them, it was better to die than go on living lives full of evil, hurting each other and being hurt by violence and wickedness and sin. But for you and me, we are called to obedience. We're called to life. We're called to follow a God who knows how we were made because he made us. And we can trust in what he has to say, even if we don't know why in the moment. So for us, we can be like Noah and be included in God's plan. Not because we always have everything together, or we always know what's going on, or we're the best Christian, or we're the most confident, or we're a genius and know what God always has to say, but because we obey and follow. Have a good week, guys.